right, this is Marcus Hansen here from FTF Canada. Pleasure to be joined by Coach Shayne from Guelph University, OUA and U Sport University. Great program that he's running here. Shayne, first of all, I just want to say thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks a lot, Marcus. Really excited to be here, so thank you.
Awesome, awesome. So Shayne will be giving us a little bit of an inside look. This is another episode on the Guelph program, what he's doing on the women's soccer side and what he's building, and also giving some information to you guys about what it takes to get to a Guelph University, one of the top dominant powers in OUA, and we'll get right into it. But so Shayne, I guess first thing I can ask you is, can you tell us a little bit about the program, the history behind the program, and how did you come about the coaching position? I know we kind of just went over this off air, but yeah, if you just want to for the audience.
Yeah, no, thanks. Well, I was really lucky. I spent the first part of my time at the University of Guelph as an assistant coach with Randy Reagan. And for those that don't know Randy, Randy was one of our members of our 1986 World Cup team. And, when you work with someone who's, humble and has, been in those kinds of positions, you tend to learn lots of things just by being in his presence and watching what he does and just how he handles himself. So it had a huge influence, I think, on all of us. So I was his assistant for a number of years. And then there comes a time, I guess, where, Randy decided that he wanted to, take a pause and that was what he was going to do. So the opportunity opened up for me to apply and I felt like it was an opportunity. And so I applied and in 2017 was named the new head coach of the team. Really fortunate the assistants that I worked with wanted to stay along. So Onkar Dillon and Al Weersink both continued on and had already been long-term assistants. So I think it kind of was a seamless sort of transition, if you will. So that's kind of how the coaching position came about.
Awesome. And obviously we'll get into kind of Guelph and what they've been doing so far, but just talk about the program and how it's grown since when you first started to where you guys are at now. I know very, very close last year, talking about quarterfinals of the OUA, but yeah, from when you started to now, how have you seen the program evolve?
Well, I think we're doing a better job, I think, of getting the information out about the University of Guelph. So I think people are starting to realize that, nestled away in Guelph is this really excellent facility and wonderful campus that has a good blend of, community and academic and athletic feel. And I think it's attracted, players that are of, good academic standing and good quality players. And so by putting more and more of those players together, and I think putting a really big effort into creating a year-long program for these student athletes has allowed us to gain, some ability to be consistent in our performance, I think is the most important thing. I think the OUA is a difficult league to play in and the margins are really thin, but it's allowed us to be consistent. So I think that's why the program started to move forward because we've really put emphasis on a year-round taking care of the student athlete in a year-round kind of way.
That's fantastic. And we'll keep rolling with that in terms of the student athlete. Certain footballing characteristics. So we always try to give a little insight to players, just what they need to do or what types of elements to their game that they need to have to catch your eye on the recruiting trail or your assistant's eye. Maybe we'll start, I like to get every coach's opinion on the defending characteristics, maybe a midfielder and a forward. And what are you looking for from a player? Let's just start with actually we'll start from the very back. Let's start with the goalkeeper. We can't forget about those. But
yeah.
What type of goalkeepers do you like at your program?
Well, I think the goalkeeper is the most unique out of all of those positions, and so the goalkeeper's got to be I think we have to always agree that there's a standard. So there's a sort of a minimum standard that you've got to be able to have all the technical elements of a goalkeeper, shot stopping, good hands. But I think nowadays what's most important is that you have a leader who is able to communicate, who's able to connect your team together. Obviously, the ability to distribute, both with your hands, but probably more importantly than ever is the ability to distribute with your feet. I think are really important. So, really, we would put a real premium on just on a really strong, dominant person in goal. You need somebody who's confident. It's a very mentally taxing role, I think. The goalkeeping one is, and I think you need someone who's really strong, mentally to prepare themselves properly for the role. I think you can always work within the assets that goalkeeper has, but without that confidence, without their ability to manage manage the back line and manage their box, I think all those other things can go away really quickly. So a real leader in that position, I would say, and I know it's a very general answer, but I think everything else stems from there. I think when you talk about the rest of the players, Marcus, more than ever in modern soccer, and all trends eventually find their ways to youth systems and into the university systems as well. So I think nowadays, you can blend the attributes of a player, and they can play in multiple positions because of the flexibility that most teams play with. So I'll maybe just more summarize that. I think the player needs to be, they need to have a good awareness of the game. So they need to understand the game itself and be able to make, be able to understand when to make those right decisions on the field. I think obviously they need to be technically proficient in their game. They can't fight their first touch. There's not enough space and time to fight a first touch. So those kinds of things have to be imminent. And then if they can read the game well and they make good decisions and they're technically proficient, then they have to have that athletic character. That would round out the athletic character. So quickly, your center backs, your defenders, they have to be able to defend. I think we're so focused on attacking nowadays that they still have to be able to defend the other team's probably most dangerous player. Midfielders need to be able to, link play. And so they've got to be able to, do many things. I would say, your most well-rounded players probably. And they need strikers who are hungry and are willing to put themselves on the line in the box to put the ball in the back of the net. So, general, but I think the players will get an idea there.
Yeah, that's great. Great insight there. Thank you for that. And then next, outside of football. So we just talked about in between the four lines. Outside the lines, what type of player characteristics are you looking for? Certain attributes that, just a regular human being would have outside of what do they represent? Or how would you like Guelph represented outside of the four lines?
Yeah, so I mean, it's always hard to put a metric on something like this, but I think we look at our student athletes as their ability to have growth over the time that they're with us. So both on the field and off the field. So if they've already hit their ceiling and they're at the top of their curve at their end of their youth career, then they're not going to grow a lot in university. And I think anybody can really see that in all the schools that after 4 to 5 years of year-long programs, you can see some of our student soccer athletes across the OUA, not just at Guelph, they just grow and they become better. And so at our school, we really put a premium on that. And so, and what comes with that is we hope that, we sort of have three things that guide us, and that's to give, to grind, and to grow. And the giving part is obviously they've got to put the team above themselves. The team's directives are really important, but by improving themselves, they help our team. Obviously, the grind isn't just about how hard you work, but it's about how attentive you are to film sessions, to your academics. And then we hope that, the growth in that person, we do a lot of work with our community. Our players are heavily involved with the community, both on campus and off campus. So I look for a player who is also engaged academically. School is cool on our team. It's an important part. We have a high academic average. So you got to be interested in school, off the field, and you've got to be interested in the community because we'll be involved in that. And if you're not, it just won't be congruent with our team.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And it's like you're reading the questions off of my mind right now, but now we want to talk about academics. So before they get to Guelph, what academic standards? I know there's different majors and different majors require different GPAs, but from your guys' standpoint, what generally, when you get that team sheet, for example, at a tournament or a showcase, what's around a GPA or average you're looking for? Like, okay, they would they will be able to get in, or it most likely is that they can come to the school. What are you looking for in terms of general basis from there, from a GPA perspective?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. For us, you've got to have, for low, you've got to be, I would just say for low, you've got to be in the 80s. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
You've got to have somewhere, in the 80s, and then you just start climbing from there. And if you're after some of the bigger programs that are at our school, which I hope would attract the student athlete, that they're very interested in studying, I would say it's pretty normal for students to be applying to Guelph with 85% or higher, sort of averages coming out of high school. It doesn't mean we've had players and really great players coming in with, 81, 82% averages, but I would suggest that, your ability to get in, you need to be in the 80s for sure. If you're wanting one of those, sort of more popular or renowned programs that we have at our school.
Definitely. And so once they get to the school, we talked about, I like that saying that you had. I'm going to try to refer it, but school is cool. I love that. I love that one. What are the GPA requirements personally at Guelph to remain eligible, to continuously play? What are some standards that you guys have? Are your team rules different from the school's academic rules, and so on and so forth?
Well, we have an alignment that way, and we have a thing called the Student Athlete Mentorship Program. So every single student athlete coming in, whether a 99% student and they're going into the hardest program at the university, or they're going into, and they've come in with a lower academic average, and they're going into, maybe sort of not as more demanding program. It doesn't matter. They all are in our Student Athlete Mentorship Program. That's monitored by the university and through athletics. So all of those first years have to attend 3 hours of student athlete mentorship time at the library, or a couple of other locations on campus. And they also have to meet with a mentor once a week. And so they have to meet those requirements. And a lot of that is just to help them organize. What we found over time is that program alone has raised the student athlete GPA average higher than even the general population's average at the University of Guelph. And I think that support just helps them to organize. And if they don't meet those requirements, or someone decides that, hey, I'm just not going, or they're not checking in and they don't get their attendance checked, then they would be suspended for the following competition until such time as they made those hours up. So we're really serious about that side of things for our student athletes. In terms of hard numbers, it depends on the number of classes that they're taking at times. But I would suggest that, they can't fall below, if you fall below a 60% cumulative average, then you're sort of running into some academic risk. And that's not something that we enter or is a problem very often. So I think that would be more of the exception than the norm. The more important thing is we look at the other side. How are we going to have you succeed? And so attending these student athlete mentorship hours and meeting with your mentor, which is an upper level, senior level athlete in one of the other sports who have been trained already. That's the most important thing. And those are the things and the markers that we would guide our discussions on.
That's fantastic. I love that program. That sounds great. Like, you're literally learning from people that have already done it for 3, 4, 5 years. So that's really good to hear. I haven't heard that before, but a great.
Yeah, and sorry, Marcus, what they find is just exactly that, is that it's someone that's a 4th year women's rugby player who's the mentor, and she has, let's say, 3 of our athletes. She's been there. She knows what it's like, especially when you get to those October days that are cold and you're not feeling well, and you still got to perform for your coaches on the field, but you're finding school and midterms coming. That kind of interaction seems to really support the student athlete well, and really keeps them grounded, and keeps them sort of, I think, their confidence up. So it has been really, truthfully, a successful program at the school so far.
That's great. And we'll transition now, and it kind of leads into this mentorship thing that we're talking about. But the change, and I talk this about with a lot of people, is when you come from high school, graduated in June, or whatever the case may be, and you're a freshman coming into a program in August, there's a big culture change, not necessarily, not just with classes, but how busy you're going to become. What are some things, I know obviously the mentorship program helps with that, but what are some things or pieces of advice that you could give freshmen in terms of maybe time management, or maybe give them a little walkthrough in the day of the life of a Guelph student athlete as soon as they get on that campus as a freshman?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of things. I think, I can only speak for ourselves, but, that process actually starts long before they finish high school. So once we know that they're a committed recruit coming to the University of Guelph, we'll already have several onboarding processes that we'll do in order to, connect them with senior level athletes who will, help them to understand, hey, this is how you, register for this course. So I think by the time they actually get to campus for their, for training camp, they've kind of known everybody, they've met everybody, they've talked to everybody. So I feel like all of that's done. And I think usually the main topics come up, residence, which one should I choose? What's better or worse? And so they've already got some of that information firsthand. I've had a chance to visit those things. So I think that's one. Living arrangements always, obviously food for athletes is really important. So understanding, which meal plan do I get if I'm living on campus? Do I really need the big plan, or could I supplement it with different things? Then, obviously academics, do I really need the textbook? Do I not need the textbook? Do I have to buy it? Those kinds of things are all handled. And usually the reason why those onboarding processes are important is because if that first year athlete comes in and they feel comfortable and they kind of feel like they already have knowledge, they're going to perform better in training camp. And really, ultimately, our team wants first year players to contribute right away. And they, you always contribute when you feel comfortable, when you feel like you have a voice and that you can immediately add to the fabric of the group. That's the most important thing. So we try and do a lot of that. So I think those are the main things. And that has to do with the returning players as well. And I think they do a really good job of trying to onboard those new players that are coming to our environment.
That's fantastic. And that onboarding starts, would it be a couple months before? Does it kind of happen as soon as they post that commitment picture, or when does those type of conversations happen?
Yeah, like once, as you're going through the recruiting process, if they're in a recruiting in environments, there'll be opportunities for them to gain some insight, to our school and obviously to our team. So they get a bit of some windows, but once they commit and they're, an LOI'd, recruit, and they're coming to Guelph and they've committed, then we can start to really make sure that all the questions that they ultimately have now are answered. So, the timeline on that, it really varies from individual to individual from when they start to commit.
Definitely. And so in season versus off season now, it's always a question. I was a former Division I athlete, so I know the contrast in seasons and so on and so forth. But for you guys, what is the difference? I know you're probably in season, you're probably 5 to 6 days a week. Off season, it might be a little bit less just based on there's no games going on with travel and stuff like that. But how different are the two seasons for your program?
Yeah, like I think absolute time, obviously from August to November is really busy. So it's full on, and I would argue it's as demanding as any environment. The players are really going. I would say, it's 7 days a week. We may not be together on that, sort of on a recovery day. We often will allow the athletes to have some opportunities to do different recovery based around their academic schedule. We found that's been useful here. So I would say it's the same across a lot of places. It's full on, and you can't be faint of heart to be a varsity athlete in any environment. As we come out of that, our January to April, it's a fairly robust program. We have an indoor facility, so we'll train a couple of days a week, usually early morning. So that's always the tough thing for the players, is it's before school starts. So that usually gets them, going a little bit. And I think they're happy when April comes and it's done. And then we put a bit of a premium, because that's almost like an off season. If you think about a year-round program, we put a little bit more premium on the mobility and stability and sort of the conditioning and strength on that side of the year. And then, we're fortunate we get out and we'll play some exhibition games against some other, OUA opponents or otherwise. And then sort of in April, players sort of released to go to their summer environments, which over the past number of years has often been in Guelph, some of the League One environments. So, we help to help direct where we think it's best. But certainly if a player says, I've got to go back home to a particular location because they've got a job there and they can play, with a high level in that environment, then, for sure, we'll always support them in that endeavor.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Good to see that there's a lot of options and great insight in terms of the contrast of schedules. You can just tell it's rigorous, and just for athletes that are listening, it's different. You're definitely gonna have it's almost like two different seasons, but at the end of the day, you still get the best out of it for sure.
Yeah, and I think, Marcus, the other thing I would add there is, the big difference from youth to like I would say an OUA institution is that many of them travel, the men and women travel together if you're traveling. And so it makes for, like if it's a Sunday and you're traveling away, you're traveling with the men and the women. Women play first, men play after. So both parties are, it's long days for those particular teams. And, it involves, packing your food, packing your schoolwork, making sure that that it's going to be, you're leaving early in the morning, coming back late at night, depending on the length of travel. So that's a real big difference in season for sure.
Definitely. Awesome. And we'll get into it a little bit now. I know we talked a lot about the recruits, freshman youth club, for example, youth soccer, but transfers. There's a lot of transfers that eventually might want to come to Guelph. Maybe they were unhappy at another institution or whatever the case would be. CCA transfers, another thing from maybe it's, for instance, the OCA in Ontario or others. What advice could you give a transfer that might want to come to Guelph? How can they be seen by you? Obviously, they can't participate in showcases and so on and so forth. So let's just say someone wanted to come to Guelph and they were a 2-year transfer from a program or a 1-year transfer from a program. How could they best get in contact with you and try to build some type of relationship or get seen by you?
So I think the first thing is always you always need to check on the email is always the first place to start. And I'm sure I miss a couple along the way. You get a lot of different communications, but I always suggest that that's the first place to start. And I think we do a very good job of keeping in contact with lots of players, but that's the first place I would always start. And then from there, I think the second thing is, is it really your true intent to come to the University of Guelph? So from my perspective, are we really a viable institution, or are you just throwing out a net wide? Because, I always want to know that a player that, maybe transferring into Guelph really sees it as a place that they go, I really want to go here to finish up, or there is a real strong academic reason. So, we've had a couple of transfers in the past that have worked out really well because I think they've really wanted to come to the school, and it's that whole person sort of philosophy. So we just graduated a player that played at Santa Clara by the name of Jenna Holtz. She was here for 2 years. She played in the Elite Eight of the tournament before she had gotten to us, took a year off at Santa Clara, came and played 2 years with us, and was a real exceptional midfielder for us. And that was born out of the fact also that the master's program that she was studying at Guelph really fit, a life goal for her. So the both things aligned. It wasn't just a soccer sort of play. It was a whole sort of play. And I find when you're transferring, I think you really have to consider both sides of that. Does the soccer, but does the academic side, does that all fit? And if it does, then I think it's a really good fit. So email to start, and then generally speaking, if people really have a real true interest, that relationship tends to build, and then we can kind of go from there through video, and other stuff to, evaluate if that transfer is a really good fit for us.
Awesome. That's awesome. And again, I think you're just reading my mind today, but you just mentioned video, highlight videos. We get a lot of highlight videos. Can you send my highlight to this coach? Can you do this? Can you do that? I know you probably watch a ton of highlight videos, especially now during this COVID-19 time. Can't be able to watch live games and stuff like that. But what are maybe some do's and don'ts, if you had to, maybe one do and one don't from when you watch a highlight tape? You've probably seen some great ones, and you've probably seen some not so great ones. But yeah, generally speaking, if you could just give some insight on highlight tapes and what your thoughts are on that.
I'll start with the first one. Don't just show me the greatest parts of you. I enjoy if there's a bit of a longer segment. I enjoy the fact that, I get a longer piece to look at because I want to see how you react in different situations. It never is perfect. We all know that in the game. There are lots of things, lots of good decisions you'll make, lots of good moments you have, and then moments where, we all could have back. And that goes for everybody in all walks of life. So I think that allows us to really look at the player and have a better, indication. So don't just send me, your 3 really great, clips and that. So I'd like something myself personally. I like something a little bit longer, and sort of showing a couple of different things. I think it's important at Guelph that you sort of, are playing both the defensive phase and the attacking phase of the ball. So I'm interested that you're able to do both of those things. So show me a bit of, yourself on both sides of that, not just, breaking a line with a pass or making a great action to create an opportunity in the attacking part of the field, but also show me, this is kind of the, you've got the ability to close space quickly. You've got the ability to press an opponent. You've got the ability to recover and come back and get compact. So I think that's what I see often, is that it's all the attacking moments or it's all of that kind of stuff with the ball. But I think there are a lot of other moments that players could highlight that they should see that are just as much value than just the line breaking pass or the attacking action that you have.
Great insight. And recruiting strategies now because of COVID. Obviously, they've taken a hit. I know the Umbro Showcase is a great showcase that was recently called off. That probably would have happened, I think, last week, now that we're talking. But what are some recruiting strategies that you guys are doing a little bit different at Guelph? How are you getting in contact with recruits? How are recruits getting in contact with you? I know we talked about email, but how's that going for you guys right now?
Yeah, so I think it's, desperate times when they're kind of difficult, require people to, really engage themselves in making that connection and contact. So in the absence of that stuff, what are you doing, to kind of do it, to make those connections? So I think the players that we're in touch with are ones that are, actively, asking for our time and are actively, saying, hey, can we reach out? Can we talk? Can we jump on a call? I'd like to tell you what I am trying to do, while we're down. So I think, we're interested in people who are really proactive in this time frame versus, maybe potential recruits that have just sort of thrown their hands up because there is no competition out there right now. In terms of recruiting strategy, I think it's always been our case to build good, positive relationships with people. And so that hasn't changed. It might have just changed in the format and the medium. But it means that we've just had more Zoom calls like this and more opportunities to do online stuff. So the interactions have stayed consistent, even though we're not pitch side and able to talk in person. So I think that's the big thing that we see, is just continually creating and developing relationships, because they ultimately are the things that will determine whether the fit is right. Less particularly, their one-off performance. I think recruiting is always a collection of observations that you make and interactions that you make, and those come in lots of different ways. And, that's kind of how we've tackled things for the last number of years. And through that process, we feel it's helped us to bring in some really good people into our environment. So, while we can't be on the field side, and certainly that's those are some boxes that you can't check, but I think there's lots you can do right now to really engage with coaches. So I'd highly suggest for any recruits that are watching and keeping active on your channel is to, use this time, reach out, connect as much as you can, because I think those things will have impact when this whole thing starts to run again and we get back to soccer as we used to know it.
Sure. And when we get back to just regular life and how it used to be, as we could say, even though it's only been really 2 months, what are some events that recruits can see you at? Or what are some events that you guys maybe pencil in that they could get looked at by Guelph? Is it, I know we just recently talked about Umbro. Are there certain league games you guys would attend? I know Ontario Soccer does a good job of hosting like showcase weekends and so on and so forth. I think Guelph is always a destination with your guys' facilities there. I've been there a couple of times. They're fantastic. But yeah, where do you guys go a lot to do a lot of your game watching?
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of everything that you've mentioned, and we'll try and get to as many of the locations that we can. So, obviously some of the big traditional events, we always try to have a presence at, whether that be, Umbro or otherwise. And, I find that watching the prospective recruit in their team, in their environment, in their league is always helpful for us. So the ones that we feel have really established a good rapport with us, we really try and see them there. So we've always been at the traditional ones, like we've been up at Trent. Stuart always does a really good job at Trent and the Wesley Clover, and up in a couple of showcases in Ottawa. Obviously the Umbro. There was one in Waterloo this year. That was ready to be had, so we would have been in Waterloo as well. We've been out west to a couple of the showcases that have been run out there as well. So we try and get to those different locations, and then in between we're trying to see players in their own atmosphere, in their own Wednesday night league game, or a weekend OPDL game that they may be playing. That's
great. And just to give recruits a little bit of an example or paint a picture a little bit for them, the recruiting years. So, and I know male and female soccer works a little bit differently. I consider girls just one step ahead in terms of when you should start looking at getting recruited. Where do you guys stand? So for the next class, so let's just say 2020 is about to begin. Are you guys still heavily looking in 2020? Is it strictly on to 2021? What is your kind of recruiting calendar look from like a 12-month period, maybe, in a short cycle, if that's possible?
Yeah. So, we cross our fingers goals. But yeah, 2020, we're there. I feel really good about where the squad's at, and we would be there from a recruiting perspective. It's not to say that there aren't some student athletes that will choose Guelph academically, and then if soccer runs this summer and we run into any kind of difficulties with our squad, from an injury in a particular league game somewhere, then we may reach back into some of those contacts and say, we'd like you to come to camp. But right now, I feel pretty good about where 2020 is at. So our focus is on 2021 and looking at recruits there that we feel will be a good fit for us. So I would say probably like most schools, we're really actively speaking with that class of player now. So if you are someone who's entering university in 2021. It's a really good time to reach out. It's a really good time to establish contact, because for some of those players, Marcus, if there is any soccer, they might get a chance to play into the fall. So if, the senior leagues might not happen, but maybe some of the youth leagues can continue to happen because they're not going off to school. So if you are one of those players and you are looking at, our school, it's great to hear from you, because then we can at least maybe see you in October, September, if there is some league play. That's really where our focus is. And then we start to, I think some of the gradual contact of the 2022 class, some of the more I'll say, active and progressive student athletes in that regard. Some of those have started to reach out, but I wouldn't say it's our sole focus right now. Our focus would be really on that 2021 class.
Awesome. And when does, when does the clock start to tick to 2022? So I know it's in 2021 is kind of that prime time right now. When does that clock tick? Do you guys normally, for instance, when were you sorted out for 2020? Was it before Christmas? Was it February, March? When do you kind of get a good feel of where you're at? Obviously, not every year is the same, but generally speaking.
Yeah, well, let's look at the 2021 class. So I think, moving into September, all of those 2021 class of player are now eligible for, to sign their letter of intents, right? From, sort of they're in their last year of high school. So that's really, some players, you will have had sort of large conversations with throughout the summer. And as you move into the fall, that's where, let's say, you're starting to close some of those relationships into commitments for the 2021. And I would say at that time, sort of, if this was a normal summer, there'd be some touch points from the 2022 class. So I would say, like, the reach outs from that class for me usually start this summer and into the fall. So that's in their grade 11 year. That's when I feel like they're starting to make really good contacts. That class of player would, end up, let's say, this December, at a place like Durham that offers, that runs their showcase, or, I apologize to the guys in Ottawa, but I've been up to their showcase that they run.
Yep, OPSM.
OPSM, yeah, I've been up to those guys in OPSM. So like that, those kinds of things at the end of 2020,
yeah,
I'll be a bit of 2021 crew, but I that's where you'll start to make that initial 2022 potential recruit, because they may be in some of those showcases, and you identify them and said, hey, there's some attributes I like. Hi, my name is, and that's when you start that relationship. And then I would say, as you enter, the clock turns January of 2021, then those 2022s, that becomes the focal point of that. So you're always kind of a year ahead on your focal point, while you're still sort of solidifying the final relationships that you've built with your 2021 class. So, and I think it's probably different for everybody, but that's kind of how we've handled it here. So right now, we're in the mix of 2021. We'll identify some 2022s in the late fall if soccer is in a normal cycle in January, and then they will become people that we'll want to invite to some of our in-house recruiting events in 2021 at the front end, to then be able to observe them in the summer of 2021 for the 2022 class.
That's perfect. That's perfect. And great insight there. So for all the recruits that are listening, you have the blueprint of what the timetable looks like. So as Coach Shayne's talking about, just get in contact. Get in contact. It's the best way. It's the best time right now. And get yourself the exposure, your own exposure that you can create for yourself currently.
Yeah, Marcus, I think the last thing I just would add there, if you don't mind, is that, everybody's process is a little bit different. And so you have to own your own process. And the best thing I could say to all of the recruits, that are in, and tuned into the channel that you have through your platform, is just, you have to really own your process, and no one's going to be out there advocating for you. So the sooner you own your process and you start to really reach out and make it honest, and make it, make it real and honest with where you're thinking. It's never a problem for me if, you're trying to decide between, a school in the US or a school in Canada. Just be open about that. Just, it's okay to say, yeah, I'm looking at these schools, because at the end of the day, the best choice is the one that's best for that student athlete. That's the most important reason that they should choose a school, not for any other reason. So, I'm happy to know that I'm at the table with the decisions you're making with other schools as well. It would be normal, I think, for the majority of recruits to have a few or a handful of schools. So own your process early, and then just be honest with it. Just really, if you're interested in Guelph, just let it be an honest intention from the beginning. And even if it's Guelph amongst 3 or 4 or 5 other schools, that's cool. There's no problem with that. I think it's understood from coaches that you're going to have a couple of choices that you're trying to narrow down.
Definitely. Great insight. And now next thing is individual events. Obviously you guys have your own in-house recruiting events. ID camps of some sort, special recruiting events. And I know there's others. You mentioned OPSM. We ran a combine with them last year. We have individual combines. What do you see from individual events that, and maybe some differences comparatively speaking to a showcase? We, for example, what we try to educate is you're by yourself almost. There's some things that you might be able to hide with your team, or put on the forefront. You might play at a higher level team, but your showcase team or individual ID camp team might not be as strong. So how are you going to carry that group and so on and so forth, so you really get an understanding? But when you go to events like that, and when you have events of your own like that, what are you guys particularly looking for from a player?
Well, listen, I give a shout out to Godwin too. Tell him sorry, Godwin. I knew it was OPSM. I just couldn't. Sorry, but no. I think when you go to any of those events, I think it's like, I think first and foremost, it's exactly as you just said, Marcus. Like, how do you react? You're going to see that player inside their team environment. So you're going to see them in the web of, maybe their team is one of the top teams in Ontario, the country, what have you. But once you pull them outside of that fabric, how do they react? Because that's the reality, is they're coming out of that group and they're going into a new group with other, athletes that are maybe 3-4 years older than them. And so I'm really looking at, when I look at those kinds of events, how do they react? How do they react to the, to the problems, especially if it's a combine event and you're mixed up with people who you've never played with. How do they react when the pass doesn't come to the foot that you want? Do you shrug, or do you just get on with it? Or do you lift them up? Or, are you someone who's binding and gluing the team together? Because no team escapes adversity. And so how do you deal with it? So those are the things I probably look for more when I'm when there's events where you're mixed in with, I expect the passes go awry. I expect that it doesn't look perfect, going back to my point on video. I expect it, but how do you react to that? And I think that will tell me a lot about the space of growth that particular student athlete has. And or the other thing I like to watch is, how do they take on information from whatever coach is coaching them? So if there's a guest coach on the sideline that's taking that particular group of players, if you're watching some combines at different showcases, how do they react to the instructions that have been given by that coach that, again, may not be in the same framework that they're used to playing from? Because when they come to a school, we might decide that their attributes are really well suited for let's call it an attacking fullback position, when they're really used to being a central midfielder. So, they have to be willing to look at that. So those are the things I think more, because I think most players that are going to many of these events now more than ever, I think with all of the instruction, they have a base level of talent. So I don't think that the base level of talent is not, I think the base is higher now amongst all players, but it's now those things. How do you deal with the disappointment, you don't get that return pass that you expected? Do you close the space right away, win the ball back? And, that would catch my eye at a combine. Someone scores, you put the ball in the back of the net, did you go and acknowledge the player that, provided that amazing ball for you? Or do you just, turn around and point at your shirt and say, look at me? I think those things matter when it comes to difficult days in October when it's cold, rainy, and not the best weather in U Sports playoff time.
Most definitely. And Shayne, you've been a great guest, and I've even learned a lot just from hearing you speak for the last half an hour or so, however long we've been talking. But further advice for any Canadians trying to get to your program or in general. Obviously, OUA is a gauntlet of a conference, and it's a very high level. But just any advice that you could give any young footballers out there from your past experience dealing with young athletes.
Well, look, I mean, you can never, truthfully, take my Guelph hat off. You cannot go wrong with any of the schools that compete in the OUA conference. They're top academic institutions. The coaching staffs that work at all of those institutions work above and beyond to make their program the best it can be. So know that there are lots of places to go and so many good programs. And if I go outside the province, I'm obviously more familiar with in province, but if I go outside the province, I mean, there's just such a huge bucket of really great coaches, institutions, and support. So you can have an amazing experience if you're really willing, to look at it. So I think the final thing would be is there's probably a place for you as a potential recruit. So, are you really getting after it? Are you really putting in the time? And it's not just about going out and getting your run in for the day. Have you made those 1 or 2 calls, 1 or 2 emails? If you didn't hear from that coach for 2 or 3 weeks, have you responded again and said, hey, I know you're busy. It's crazy in this COVID time. If you take that initiative and you're willing to really look broadly at a variety of programs, then I think you've got a real shot. And then certainly, for us at Guelph, the start is always, making that connection. Just, send me that email that's an honest dialogue, that starts an honest dialogue with us, and that you really are interested in Guelph. And that generally, causes a response. And that's where really most of our relationships with players have started. And then from there, it just, we can grow it from there. So that's my biggest thing. But be proactive. And there's lots of opportunity. Oh my goodness, there's lots of opportunity. So many in the OUA, like the programs are just incredible. And I'm a big advocate, first of you doing what's best for you as a student athlete, but probably really closely on top of that, I'm really proud of the work that everybody's doing here at home, both in Ontario and across the country. There's some really good things, and I'm really glad you're shedding light on all of the different things that my colleagues are doing. They do great things.
Awesome. Yeah, you guys are, like I said, doing a great job. And there's so much to learn. There's so much to learn while you're at the program, while you're at a school. And we have some of the top-notch institutions, not just academically, but athletically too. So, Shayne, really appreciate your time. Thank you for our last episode of Inside Look. Really appreciate it. Wish you best of luck this season as well. I'm fingers crossed that we do have a season. Yeah. And just appreciate you guys coming on, and we'll definitely be in contact in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. I really appreciate the call. So best wishes to everybody. Stay safe and all the best. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thank you.